Welcome to the President and CEO Focus on the Middle Market podcast series, where President and CEO Founder Paul Stukel discusses middle market issues with business leaders from across the nation. Today, Paul speaks with Jason Levesque, former U.S. Army drill sergeant and founder and CEO of Argo Marketing in Maine, about leadership lessons learned in the United States military.
If you could just give us some background on yourself. I know you were an Army drill sergeant, and then also about tell us about Argo.
Yeah, sure, I'd love to. It started, I guess, in West Virginia. After high school, I went to college, and after 2 years at West Virginia Wesleyan, I just kind of got myself into a funk, if you would. I was bored. I wanted to challenge my life and do something exciting. So I went over to the recruiting office and talked to a U.S. Army recruiter, and 2 weeks later I was in Fort Benning, Georgia. And that's how it started. And I was enlisted, and it was infantry. It was, my recruiter said, "Do you like to hike and camp?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it sounds great." And of course I love that. I'm from Maine. He goes, "You're going to love the infantry." Well, okay. So I ended up being an infantryman for 8 years. Fort Riley, Kansas, Fort Benning, Georgia, mishmash of different places. And it was a great experience, of course. Looking back on it, while I was doing it, maybe not so much. But you always, hindsight's always 20/20. I left the military, came back to Maine, where my family's from. Frankly, had no idea what I was going to do, and I really wasn't qualified to do anything from my military training. It wasn't like I was an engineer in the military, and that could easily transfer to a civilian occupation. I was an infantryman. Really not much used for throwing hand grenades and shooting someone at 300 meters with an M16 in the civilian world, thankfully.
Not yet.
Not yet. Not yet. I'm a little rusty.
Yeah.
But I ended up working in call centers, and while I was going back to school, and ended up teaching swimming at local elementary schools, and it just kind of started over the next couple of years getting involved more and more with marketing concepts. I found it fascinating, and I love the leadership aspects of contact centers and a lot of young, early entry-level folks that needed mentorship, that needed to be, brought along, so to speak, an organization applied to their lives, both personal and professional. And it just kind of morphed into Argo. Now fast forward to today, and we have 450 employees at the company. We're doing a whole facet of customer engagement, pioneering social media engagement with regards to customer care, 24/7 telephone support for customers of our clients all over the world in about 6 different languages. Back-end banking investigations. We're doing a whole host of back-end office solutions on behalf of marketers. I'm a big proponent of the state of Maine. I love it here. It's my home. It's got a great quality of people and high work ethic. So we have 3 contact centers here in Maine, total of about 310 seats. We like to think we were part of that onshoring or right-shoring push by companies coming back and bringing customer service and customer engagement back home, back to the United States. And I think that pendulum's really swung. You hear the stories about large, corporations still outsourcing, but and it's going to happen. There's going to be flexibility in the marketplace. But looking at the statistics over the last 2 to 3 years, a vast majority of companies have moved their back-end operations back home. If you just look at your upfront cost, of course it's going to be better offshore, and the labor is cheaper. And labor is literally the vast majority of your overall operating expenses. But when you then compare it to a long-term or lifetime value that you can gain by using good, high-quality domestic service and support, it's a no-brainer. You actually can apply a return on investment to customer care. Normally it's just been a red line on your P&L.
Well, you've obviously been successful at it. Being a military person, having come from that world, I noticed I didn't read it in great depth, but I read the Korn Ferry report that Caitlin had mentioned about military leaders being effective CEOs. What is it about the military that makes such good corporate leaders?
Yeah, I read that as well. It was actually kind of interesting. I don't think there's one attribute that makes a former military member a great CEO or manager, for that matter. I think it's a combination of things. I think it can be bundled up into the fact that military members are people that in the military you learned to just keep going forward. Don't let anything knock you down. Don't get discouraged. Apply principled, work ethics and due diligence to everything you do, and just keep walking forward. Perfect analogy is, and your daughter's going to talk about this, when she's doing that first 12-mile forced hike with 60 pounds on her back and a rifle in her arms, and they start off at 1 in the morning. After a while, your body just keeps saying over and over, take a step, take a step, take a step, take a step, and you do that for miles just to get through it. But you can't quit, and that, I think, is that underlying kind of push that we all have. I know it's what I have. Don't quit. You have a bad call, you can have a bad day, you can have a bad quarter. Just keep going. Maybe we're just stubborn.
Right. So stubborn can be good. Get you through an awful lot of things.
Good. But also a couple, like terrain dictates is another one. It's just one of those things. When you're in the infantry, okay, you have to go from A to Z, but guess what? There's a hill there, and it's filled with barbed wire and machine guns. Well, no, terrain dictates. Terrain's dictating, then I have to kind of go around that hill. Same thing in business. I always say to my folks here, my mid-managers, terrain dictates. You have to accomplish the goal, the mission, but be fluid enough and dynamic enough to kind of go around obstacles, to do some critical thinking.
I actually have had the honor to work with quite a few military folks, combination of Marines and Army folks. And it's interesting. This whole subject has had me thinking about them again. And what you just said resonates quite well with me. Because they were the guys that I could always rely on, and I always felt uncomfortable doing it. I was the CEO. It was in a startup, and it was a technology startup, and I had these gentlemen working for me, and I always hated to use that phrase "for me." I mean, it was basically with me. And I was a snot-nosed kid, and there were these guys who'd been there and done that. They had medals and all that stuff, But that is exactly what they would do. If I needed something done that was, a challenge and that had, as you say, terrain issues, they were the guys to go to, and they would always do it, but with sort of a smile and say, "Yep, okay, I'll let you know."
Then they start thinking of what needed to get done.
Yeah, right. It was not not daunting to them. It was just said, "Okay, I'll let you know how it's going to get done." It resonates. It really does.
And no matter what you told them to do, at least with me, I look back and I'm like, well, at least I'm not going to be wet and hungry for 7 days. It's okay. There's worse things to be doing right now. I'm not humping a rucksack up and down a mountain. I'm okay. Yeah, whatever.
Exactly.
So, there's definitely worse options.
I really respect those guys. Now, are there things in the military that actually don't translate really well to civilian leadership, do you think?
Yeah, emotions, feelings. We don't have feelings in the military. Or you do, they're subdued and they're saved for family and not for work. But in the civilian world, people, they have feelings and they can get hurt and bruised and they become an impediment to success. So
right.
When I say that, you don't purposely go out and yell at someone and belittle them. No. It's about sometimes a curtness that can come from the military. Just normal. It's like, hey, get this done. Very matter of fact. And when you hear that from your leader, okay, just go get it done. That's it. But in the civilians, and in the civilian world, of course, I've had problems with that personally. I've seen that isn't the right approach, and I've had to change some things that I've done, kind of my approaches, and been more explanatory to folks, and just different tone.
Right.
And mostly the grenades, they don't really mix well. So
again, there may be times.
I've always said I would love to run barbed wire smoke grenade simulators on my contact center floor and just really get them going. Just make it exciting. But no, my HR says I can't do that.
I know it's really a crying shame when you get right down to it.
It is.
So for CEOs or any kind of sort of corporate leaders that have not had that military experience, that really haven't had that ingrained in them in particularly tough ways, what kind of advice can you give them? I mean, in terms of their corporate leadership and what they can do to improve based on the experience you've had.
Oh wow, there's a lot. everything's in bits and pieces. I think there's one kind of phrase that I picked up from, and I can't remember the field manual. It's basically it's the Army's field manual on leadership. I can't remember the nomenclature. I'm kicking myself. I should have pulled that out for you. But it's great because it's about 100 pages, and it really breaks it down into simple points. One is be, know, do. Be the expert, know the situation, and do the difficult jobs that you require others to do. So be, know, do. Be a leader, and just keep saying that as your mantra. When you're leading other people. And I take great pride, and I've always found it a great challenge to find leaders. And that's what I'm always looking for, is finding leaders within the ranks. That could be an 18-year-old kid fresh out of high school, and then bringing them up and trying to give them those bits of information. So if you are a leader and you don't have that military expertise, just remember that you have to know and be able to do everything that's required in your company that you're going to ask other people to do.
Hey, I understand you ran for Congress a few years ago.
Yeah,
I bet that was quite the experience.
That was
Speaking of grenades.
Speaking of grenades, yeah, it was an eye-opening experience. Overall, I loved it. It was the largest congressional district, still is, east of the Mississippi, geographically, of course. And we were out there, long days, shaking hands, really talking to people, understanding, it's not unlike, being candid is not unlike being a CEO of a company. You've got a lot of different departments that all have to work together and play nice in order to accomplish a mission, in this case, to get you elected. So there's, raising a venture capital. That's fundraising calls. There's direct mail. There's telephone outreach. There's media buying. There's production. There's messaging. So it's pretty fascinating. But I've definitely taken those lessons and applied them to business, frankly. And I think my business has been stronger since.
Be sure to check back for future episodes of the President and CEO Focus on the Middle Market podcast series. Thanks for listening.